Hey there, welcome to the Tech Tuesdays webinar on GitHub integration version control. I am Brinda and I'll be hosting today's webinar. Through this webinar, users will get an overview of how GitHub version control feature would work in IICS. Today's presenter is Bharat Radhakrishna, who has been working with the Informatica Cloud team for more than 10 years. He is experienced in troubleshooting complex issues and is an expert at performance tuning, knowledge sharing, and helping customers with new features available in cloud data integration. Before we start the webinar, here are some housekeeping tips. This webinar, as usual, is for 1 hour that includes a 45 minutes webcast, and then we'll move over to live for 15 minutes to answer your questions. All dial-in participants will be muted to enable the speakers to present without any interruptions. Your questions can be submitted through the Q&A section and we'll be addressing them to the end of the presentation. The webinar will be recorded and will be available in the Informatica Support YouTube channel and the Success portal. The link will be emailed to you as well. You can set aside some time to complete the post-webinar survey and provide your feedback and suggestions for upcoming topics for the Tech Tuesdays webinars. The Tech Tuesdays webinars is a webinar series introduced within the Success portal. The Informatica Success portal is a microlearning platform that offers free and unlimited learning to all registered users. The Success portal lists your success offerings, your customer success manager information, bookings available in the Ask an Expert session, and customized recommendation and content. Our new intelligent virtual assistant Diana is available in the Success portal for all our cloud customers. Over to you, Bharat. Thank you.
Welcome to Tech Tuesday session. This is Bharat here. In this particular session, we're going to talk about how to configure GitHub with Informatica Cloud. This is the agenda for today's session. We're going to talk about use cases. We're going to talk about source control actions, some of the actions that are available with GitHub. We'll check out how to configure source control with Informatica Cloud. Monitoring source control logs. We'll have a short demo and best practices, recommended practices with Informatica Cloud GitHub. And then we're going to just talk about IICS asset management CLI utility. Some of the primary use cases with Informatica Cloud GitHub are backup management, source control management, rollback, promotion of assets across environments. So backup management, basically an ability to perform daily or weekly or monthly backups based on the user requirement. We can do this via source control of GitHub with Informatica Cloud. Currently, our users are also making use of the export and then import as a feature, using which they can export an asset from an org, keep a backup on their local machine, or import it into another org. So that is also being used. Using source control or GitHub, user can perform all these actions using the UI itself. There is no need to download any particular asset and then keep it on a local machine. Rollback, say for example, I have a version 2 of a mapping in my production environment, and I want to replace it with a previous version of the mapping, then I would go ahead and I can use this source control feature to go ahead and roll back to the previous version. Promotion of assets, when there is a requirement to go ahead and move assets from one environment to another, we can use this feature basically to move from development to production environment. These are some of the source control actions available with the source Informatica Cloud on GitHub. So pull an object. Pull an object basically it says to pull an object from GitHub to a local environment or a local org, or update the object in an organization with the version that we have in our GitHub. Check out an object. Check out an object basically, when we check out an object, the object locks so that other users cannot make any changes. So when we check out on a particular asset, say for instance, I as a user check out an object, then other users, even I cannot be able to go ahead and make any changes to that particular asset. So it will be like a read only. So if I have to make any changes, then I have to check in an object, uh, so that the lock is released, and then I can make the changes. So as we talk about check-in an object, basically check-in an object is to move an object to the GitHub or update the source control repository with the latest version of the object that we have on our Informatica Cloud org. Delete an object, deleting an object from our organization and the source control repository. One thing to notice before we delete the object, we must check out the asset uh, before deleting it. Restore to a previous version. Say for instance, I have one version on my local org and I want to restore it to a previous version. I can just pull an object from GitHub to restore it. Undo a checkout. Say for example, I do not want to save any changes that I've made to a particular task in Informatica Cloud. I can use this particular feature of undo a checkout. This is the source control actions flow with Informatica Cloud GitHub. So basically, as you see that we have a dev org, we have a GitHub, and we have a non-dev org. So these are some of the actions like we discussed in our previous slide that can be performed, like check out an object, check in an object. Check in is basically pushing it to GitHub, pull an object from GitHub to a local environment. So I can either pull it to a development org or to a non-development org. Unlink an object from one org with GitHub. So we'll talk about configuring GitHub on Informatica Cloud source control configuration. So users can go ahead and configure source control in an org to enable version management for, say, a project or a folder or an assets. It can be as many as up to 1,000 assets, or less than, or at least one asset. So whatever the number of assets that we want to do a version management can be done with Informatica Cloud GitHub. So one thing to note here is objects are not checked in automatically. That is, objects are not pushed into GitHub automatically. Users need to go ahead and check in an object. They can either do one or more assets or projects or folders. So source control license is definitely required for an org uh, in order to configure GitHub with Informatica Cloud. If users do not see the source control license available currently on their org, they can reach out to us uh, so that we can work with the internal teams to enable the licenses for their org. Configure read-write access to source control repository. So when say read-write access is configured, users can go ahead and check in or check out an object, pull an object, or push an object uh, from a local environment. Or when I say local environment, it's a local org to GitHub. So the other thing is configuring read-only access. So in this, when I configure read-only access, in that case, I can only go ahead and pull an object or an asset from GitHub. Here, I would not be able to do any other actions, unlike the previous one where I have read-write access to source control repository. When I have only read-only access, I would not be able to go ahead and check in or check out an object. Change repository access type. So users can go ahead and change from read-write access to read-only. But one thing to note here is we need to ensure that no objects are checked out, because Informatica Cloud does not allow to change the access type from read-write to read-only if any of the tasks or assets are checked out. Change repository URL. So say, for example, I'm connecting to a version A of GitHub and I want to change the URL, I want to connect to a different GitHub instance. So this is how I basically go ahead and change the repository URL. So users must first go ahead and unlink all the assets, because Informatica Cloud does not allow to change the URL unless any of the assets are not unlinked. So we need to first of all unlink all the assets in order to make this change. So how to make this change, we'll talk about in our demo session. But but if you can note here that basically it's a simple way to go ahead and change the repository URL. Just go to administrator page on Informatica Cloud, click on settings, and then update the new URL. One thing to note here is the repository URL must use HTTPS protocol. Okay, disable source control. Say, so for instance, I would not want to use source control. I want to disable it. Users can go and do that, but they need to unlink all the objects from source control and then disable the access from the GitHub. So here, users can go ahead and click on the settings page again, and then in the source control, just go ahead and disable allow push to Git repository. Source control configuration for suborg. So we can also basically go ahead and pull or push an asset from a parent org as well as a suborg. So suborg can also be configured on the settings tab in the suborg, not on the parent org, but this is specific to the suborg. Informatica recommends to have a own source control repository, a different instance of GitHub for the suborg. Say for example, the parent org has instance A, then we can choose to have instance B for the suborg. It's not recommended to use the same instance for both parent org and the suborg. Monitoring source control logs. So whatever actions that we perform can be monitored. We can take a look at it to see what was the status of that particular action under monitoring source control log. So this is available in the monitor page on the Informatica Cloud. So when users click on the monitor tab, there is an option called source control log. So they can click on that to view all the actions that have been performed with GitHub. So users can go and monitor all the actions in an org performed on source control objects. The Informatica Cloud basically logs all the actions every time a user performs an object, performs an action on an object. So it can be a push, it can be a pull, it can be a check-in, it can be an unlink. All these actions are tracked and are available in the source control logs. So one thing to note here is the logs are retained for 7 days. Okay, so who can view the source control log? So to view the source control log, there is a particular privilege that a user must have in order to view this particular option. So the asset control log is the privilege that should be available with the user in order to view the source control log. So if you look at this screenshot here under the monitor page, I can see this option called source control logs. If this specific privilege is not assigned to the user, or if that user has any of the below roles like the administrator, designer, or monitor, then by default, this privilege will be available for the user. Okay, now in the previous slide, we just saw about the monitoring source control log. So say in case if there's any failure, or if users want to go ahead and view detailed information about the actions that have been performed by a specific user on an object, then users can click on the action option, which is a hyperlink. So just click on that and this page will open. So this will give us the summary of what was the action that was performed in the GitHub. This is documented in the Informatica Cloud Monitor under Monitor Source Control Logs. So you can see what is the action that was performed here. It can be unlink, it can be push pull. What's the start time? What's the end time? The Git summary. Git summary. One thing to note here is only available for check-in and pull actions. It's not available for other actions. So in this case, I've done an unlink of a specific object. So that's the reason I do not have a Git summary here. It also has a Git hash. The Git hash is something like a Git identifier, which will be available for check-in and pull. So the username, which user performed this particular action, and the status. The status can be either success, failure, in progress. In progress, say for instance, I am basically going ahead and uh, checking in multiple assets, let's say a few hundred assets from Informatica Cloud to GitHub. At that point of time, you can see this particular status as in progress. That basically means that the action is still in progress. Warning, say for example, if there's any failure, and then it would say completed with warnings. And in case of any error, the status will be error, and it will basically give the details of the error. All right, so source control management. I just want to bring up this IICS asset management utility, CLI, which is nothing but a command line interface, which is used to export import using the REST API. So the advantages of using GitHub integration with IICS versus the IICS asset management utility is, say for example, I want to use GitHub on cloud repository, then I can go ahead and use the source control available with Informatica Cloud to version my IICS assets. It's a simple plug and play. All you need to do is just configure the URL, provide the username and password for the GitHub, and then you can continue going ahead and checking in your objects or pulling an object from GitHub. A clean and simple design to use from the IICS UI directly. That is the GitHub feature that we are talking about. The asset management CLI, I need to say, for example, I want to use GitHub on-prem, then I can use this asset management CLI. And one thing to note here is we need to have a local workspace to extract assets from to Informatica Cloud. So we'll just go through a small demo here, which will basically brief you about how to configure uh, GitHub with Informatica Cloud, how to do a check-in, how to check out. I'll show you some of the actions that are available under monitor page, and then what happens when, how to basically go ahead and release a lock on an asset. But this is my Informatica Cloud org here. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, once I have the log here, once I have the log into Informatica Cloud, I'll click on the settings page. In the settings page, you can see that there is an option of source control. So if users does not see this option, then they can reach out to Informatica. Basically, it means that the license is not enabled on their org, and that's the reason why, as a user, we will not be able to see the option. So in this case, I have the source control license, so I'm going to go ahead and configure. I've already connected to my GitHub here, so I'm just going to go ahead and show you what are the options available. So yeah, once I click on edit, I'll just go ahead and give the URL here. So this URL, I got it from GitHub. So this is my GitHub on cloud. So I'm just copy pasting this URL and then copying this URL from GitHub and then pasting it in my Informatica Cloud. That's it. So this is the repository URL. This is where, say for instance, I want to go ahead and change my URL. I can do it here. The allow push to Git repository. If I check this, it basically says check-in and checkout operations will not be allowed from this org anymore. That is basically a read-only access. So I'm just going to keep it allow push to Git repository now. I'll click on save. And one other important thing to do here is, as soon as I go ahead and provide the URL here, I need to provide the credentials that I'm using to log into GitHub. So I click on this profile user here, then click on settings. Since I click on settings here, I can provide my GitHub. This is my GitHub username and password. So this will be different for different users. Say I have 10 users in my org, then all the users can go ahead and have their own instance of GitHub, and they can then go ahead and push or pull an asset. So we currently support basic auth, that is username and password. Currently, no other authentication is supported. I'm gonna go ahead and give my GitHub login credentials, and then I'll click on save. I've already provided here, so that's fine. So now my Informatica Cloud org is ready to go ahead and connect with GitHub on cloud to go ahead and push an asset or pull an asset uh, from my local instance. When I say local instance, my Informatica Cloud org. So this is the data integration page here. In the data integration page, let me go to my folder here. So here I've created a folder, GitHub_1 here, in which I have a simple asset for testing purpose, for demo purposes. So this asset is reading from one endpoint and then loading it to multiple targets. So I can go ahead and select this and then do a check-in so that only one asset will be pushed into GitHub, or I can go ahead and check in a folder, in this case GitHub_1, or I can go ahead and check in as many assets as possible from my Informatica Cloud org to GitHub. So for testing purpose, I'm just gonna go ahead and check in only this particular folder for now. But say for instance, if I have hundreds of mappings in my Informatica Cloud org, I can either go ahead and select all or pick whatever assets that I want to go ahead and push it to GitHub. So I'll just click on this, and then I will go ahead and click on check-in. Now it will give me what are the assets or the types that are being checked in into GitHub. So here the GitHub and then GitHub test v1, the mapping GitHub test v1 and the folder is being checked in. I'll click on check-in. As soon as I click on check-in, here I have to go ahead and type in the details of my assets that are being pushed into GitHub. So I'm just gonna go ahead and enter check-in. Here users can, for example, mapping version 1, and then tag it like dev or something like that. So users can go and provide a short description about the asset that is being pushed into GitHub. So I've gone ahead and provided the details here. Click on OK. As I click on OK, here you can see that there is another pop-up which says checking into assets, check source control logs for action completion. So this is what I was talking about. So we'll now go to source control logs. I'll have to open the monitor tab, and in the monitor tab, I can see the source control logs here. Here is the action that I performed. The action here it shows the start time, the username who performed this action, the git hash, this is the git identifier, and the status of this particular check-in. So here is the summary of the asset that I just checked in. So users can also go ahead and click on this option here, which is check-in. As soon as I click on that, it will give me a detailed summary of what was performed and what user had performed this. Remember in a slide for unlinking, we did not see this particular option of git hash, but since it was unlinked, that option is that value was not was not available. So this is a push. So that's the reason we have a git identifier. We push to GitHub, we have a git identifier. So under details tab, so as soon as I click on the check-in tab here, I see what type of action that is performed, the start time, the end time, summary that we just entered in, which user performed this action, the git identifier, the status of this action, and what are the assets that was checked in. Now let's go to GitHub. Let me refresh it. Okay, here you can see whatever the folder name that was available with my local org is being pushed to GitHub. As soon as I click on check-in, I click on this GitHub one. Here you can see the mapping name GitHub test v1. The GitHub test v1 is being pushed to GitHub. So one important thing to note here is you may have noticed that this has popped up. The reason is because it shows that this asset is being checked in. So if I hover my mouse here, it would say check in. Now, these are the assets that has been pushed into my GitHub. So let me just click on this JSON file. So here you can see the name, what type. Here you can see some of the attributes like the connection name, all the details, the version here, the major version, all this information is available here. So it's not recommended to make any changes here since I would want to use it to pull it to another org or in the future if I want to pull it back to my local org. I'll go back to Informatica Cloud now. So now this object is checked in into GitHub. So remember I was talking about the users will not be able to perform any actions whenever I go ahead and do a check-in because there is a lock on the asset which will not allow users to go ahead and edit this mapping. So if you see this, I can only run this mapping. I cannot make any changes. Basically, I cannot even enter a description here. There's no option to edit this mapping. If I want to edit this mapping, then I can come back here and then click on checkout. As soon as I click on checkout, that the previous display icon disappeared, and then now it says checked out by me. Now, if I click on this, I have the option to go ahead and make the changes. I can basically go ahead and edit the mapping, add a new transformation, or make whatever changes is required for this mapping. Testing purpose, I'm going to just go ahead and change it to modified. Click on save. All right, now that I have gone ahead and modified the mapping, say we'll talk about how to pull from GitHub. So say for instance, I want to go ahead and get my asset or get an asset from GitHub to Informatica Cloud. So in that case, I'll use this option, pull from Git. The project name, pull. Now it would give me the asset that needs to be pulled into my local GitHub. I'm just going to go ahead and select whatever the asset that was pushed to GitHub previously. Here you can see that this is the connection type that is available on the source, and I can go ahead and choose whatever connection that I have on my target org. Since this org also has the same connection, I'm keeping the same connection. One thing to note here is before we go ahead and pull a particular asset from GitHub to Informatica Cloud org, we need to ensure that the org where we are pulling the asset has an agent connections created. So if the org does not have an agents or connection created, then the test would fail and we will not be able to pull an asset. So now in this org, I have the flag file connection. The agents is all available. I'll click on test. I've selected the asset that needs to be pulled from GitHub. I'll click on test. The test should be successful. Yes. Now I'll click on go ahead and again, I get a pop-up saying that pulling one asset, check source control logs for the completion of the action. So let me go back to my source control here. Refresh the page. Okay, here you see there's a new action item here. It says pull. Previously we did check-in that was there with the GitHub identifier, and the check-in was successful. Now we did a checkout, remember, in order to go ahead and make changes to the mapping. That is also logged here. Now we just went ahead and pulled an asset from GitHub into my Informatica Cloud. Or if I click on this, this would also give similar details as we saw in the push, which is check-in. The start time, the end time, the summary, the user who actually performed this action, the git hash will be the same as the previous one, because this is the same asset that was previously pushed into GitHub, the status. And here is a list of assets that was pulled from GitHub. Now let me go back to my Informatica Cloud. Here I should see my asset that was pulled from GitHub to Informatica Cloud. Here it is. So this is the asset that is being pulled from Informatica Cloud to GitHub. Sorry, GitHub back to Informatica Cloud. So you can see this now. It says checked in because this is a checked in. So if I want to make a changes here, I'll have to go and click on checkout, and then make the changes, and then go and push it to GitHub again. One important thing to note here is, as a recommendation, we do not recommend pushing or pulling more than 1,000 assets. So if let's keep it less than 1,000, just to ensure that there is no performance degradation. So there is no limitation, but just to make sure that we don't face any performance issues, so it's recommended to pull less than 1,000 assets. It for the demo with GitHub. So let me just go back to my presentation again. All right. So we're going to talk about the best practices, Informatica recommendation for the best practices with GitHub on Informatica Cloud. So GitHub repositories on cloud are currently supported. GitHub on-prem is currently. So before pulling an asset from GitHub, ensure that the connections and the runtime agents are created and they are. Remember, we spoke about this when we were trying to pull an asset from GitHub to Informatica Cloud on. We got this option to go ahead and select the connection. Let me just show you there 1 second. This is what we are talking about. All right, yeah, before pulling an asset, ensure that the connections and the agents are created in the org, are available in the org. The recommendation is to maintain different tests, staging, and production orgs for GitHub. So say, for example, for development, I will have one instance of GitHub. Production, I'll have a different instance. Similarly for staging, I'll have another instance of GitHub. I do not want to have all the test, staging, and the production orgs to connect to one version of or one instance of GitHub. DevOrg can be configured for read write. This is basically that we saw in the administrator page. So it's recommended to go ahead and configure the DevOrg for read write. For production or test org, it can be read only. But also depends on your requirement. But Informatica, for DevOrg, we can keep it for a read write permission. So this is where you can configure this. I'll just go back to my administrator page here. This is what we're talking about. Allow push to Git repository. So if I uncheck this, it will become a read only. Yeah. Prod test org production or test org can be configured for read only. So this ensures that the users in development organization can make changes to assets, and it also prevents users in the non-dev orgs or in production org from accidentally pushing changes to the source control repository. That's a recommendation. Ensure that there is one dev org uses a particular source control repository. This is similar to what we discussed here. Maintain different repositories for your different environments, not have one repository for all your environments. When you enable source control for the organization, select an empty repository, basically a new instance of GitHub. Ensure that the repository does not contain a folder named Explore, because IICS stores assets under the Explore folder in the Git repository. So we do not recommend having a folder by name Explore. Do not share source control credentials among users in Informatica Cloud. As we saw, each user can create their own instance of GitHub and then provide the username and password under the settings page, under the profile settings. So I can go ahead and provide the username and password that I use to log into GitHub, and my colleague can log in using his credentials to GitHub. So we are not using the same credentials. It also makes it's also best for maintaining security and easier to track which user made a change. So in case if there is any change done by a common user, we'll not be able to track who made this change. So for tracking purposes, we can also have a different user. Create connections and ensure runtime environment exists. This is similar to what we discussed previously. When trying to pull an asset, we need to make sure that the connections and the runtime environment exist. Avoid renaming or moving source control assets that are used by other assets. So when, say for instance, when users move or rename a task or an asset, references can break. So users cannot perform an undo checkout on an asset, and that's the reason we avoid moving or renaming a source control asset. Enter the comments when users are checking in an asset. This is basically, remember the pop-up that came. It gave us a pop-up of the summary and the description. So users can go ahead and provide the release name, the summary field, and then enter more information in the description field. Checking in multiple assets at one time. So as we were discussing, try limiting the number of assets to 1,000 or fewer. Checking in more than 1,000 assets at one time can decrease the performance between Informatica Cloud and GitHub. IICS Asset Management CLI VT utility. So this utility, let me just open an article here. Give me 1 minute. The users can refer this particular page, which basically talks about IICS Asset Management CLI VT utility, a command line, command reference guide. So using this, users can go ahead and use Informatica Cloud REST API to perform operations on IICS artifacts. So this is a command line interface. So the link is provided. You can take a look at this. It can basically go and export or particular command. So you can actually go and export, import, and all these actions can be performed using the Asset Management CLI V2 utility. These are some of the helpful links and the documentation for Informatica Cloud, GitHub, GitHub on Cloud, since we support GitHub on Cloud only as of now. So you can look into all this source control configuration, source control asset management. There's some docs available online. These links will help you configure GitHub on your local orgs, and then go ahead and do a check-in or check out, basically push or pull asset to and fro from GitHub. That's it from mine. Thank you for your time. GitHub GitHub on Cloud, since we support GitHub on Cloud only as of now. So you can look into all this.
Hello everyone, we are open for question and answer section. Please post your questions in the Q&A box.
Help you configure GitHub on your local
Hi, Bharat. We have one question from Marek. Oh, he was thanking us. We have one question from Timothy. So, is it a public or private repository in GitHub? How safe is it to store the versioning related data in public repo?
Okay, so 1 second.
Bharat, do I have to repeat the question?
No. I have got the question, so I'm just checking on that. So I
Yeah.
think it's a private repo in GitHub. So how safe it is storing, I don't have an answer readily available, but I think I can get back to you on that particular answer. I think it should be a pretty safe. See, we support two-factor authentication as of now, but whatever is available on the GitHub, users cannot use it. It's just a .json file. So users cannot just download it and then import it.
Okay. Another question from Sujoy. Do you have SSO for GitHub repository on the roadmap?
Okay, so I'm not aware of anything of that feature, SSO, single sign-on, for the GitHub in the future. Maybe we can open a feature request on the same, but the SSO, basically the single sign-on that we have with Informatica is users can use their single sign-on and then log into Informatica Cloud, but the user for GitHub is entirely different. So we don't have a single sign-on to GitHub as of now. Okay, and I'll, when that's not, if you don't mind, I'll just read through the questions that we have missed. So I think there were a few questions from Matthew Smiley. I think the question that Matthew had was, what is the minimum privilege allowed for GitHub connection to work when creating the token on GitHub? And this is the token creation with GitHub personal access token. They have checkbox privileges such as repo, write, read, admin. What is the least amount? So we do not have any such details, Matthew. So I'm going to check internally to see what's the least privileges that a user can have in order to use this token. So we will get back to you on this particular question. Next question is, what if Informatica Cloud upgrade to a new release? Do we need to refresh the code stored in GitHub? Well, see, I don't. It's definitely not needed to go ahead and do a refresh code stored in the GitHub. See, we're just upgrading the Informatica Cloud releases. The agent will be upgraded. There'll be new features. If there is any changes done to the mapping, the asset, what we call in Informatica Cloud, if you want to do a check-in of that, you can do a check-in. But if there is no changes to the asset, there is no need to refresh the code. The next question is from Swati. This is with regards to when can change the security agent if you want to deploy to the higher environment. When can we change the security agent if you want to deploy the higher environment? So I'm not sure if I understand the question here, but let me try to see. I believe you want to say, for instance, you have a development org and then you push the asset into GitHub. Now you want to pull an asset from the GitHub to your production. So you want to understand when do you want to go ahead and have an agent on the higher environment. Is that correct? Is that the question? Vrinda, can you hear me?
Yes. Sorry, Bharat,
sure.
could you please
And yeah, so there was a question from Swati from Manulife.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so this is with regards to when can change the secure agent if you want to deploy to a higher environment. Not sure if I'm getting the question correctly, so I just wanted some clarification on that.
Okay, we'll get back to you after this presentation, Swati, offline.
Okay, the next question that we have is support of Bitbucket repo for source control. Okay, 1 second, let me check. As I understand, I think the GitHub on cloud is supported, but not sure of the Bitbucket. I don't think we support Bitbucket. Only GitHub on cloud is supported. So the next question is for by Venkata. This is for the can SAML users be used for checking and pull off asset objects, as we discussed previously, right? So GitHub does not have a single sign-on. So if a user has a SAML or a single sign-on on Informatica Cloud, user will land on the Informatica Cloud page, and then using the GitHub username and password that we have updated in the profile page, using that they can do a check-in or pull an asset. The next question is, can you discuss reverting a change with GitHub if needed? Is this just pulling a previous version from GitHub? Okay. Okay, I'm going to just give a scenario here. So say, for example, okay, the question is basically, can you discuss reverting a change with GitHub if needed? Is this just pulling a previous version from GitHub? So let me just give you an example here. So for example, I have a development org where I have an asset, which is reading from Salesforce and then writing to multiple targets. I do a check-in, and this asset is checked into GitHub. Now, I have to make some changes. Then what I would do is say basically I want to go ahead, I'll add another source transformation in my existing mapping. So that will become 2 source transformations instead of the one that was previously pushed into GitHub. Now, for some reason, I do not want to basically use this mapping. I can just do a pull, and it will have the first version of the mapping. Would one have, okay, the next question is from Martin Ram. Would one have Git repo for dev, account, and prod IICS org, or one Git repo per IICS org? Okay. So it is recommended to have a different instance of GitHub for your development, test org, and your production org. Instead of having one GitHub instance, it is better to have multiple instances. How to get logged beyond 7 days? Any workaround? Unfortunately, no, we do not have any workaround as of now. Only 7 days of log will be available. Okay, the next question is from Raghavinder. How a code checked into dev repository to be moved to test repository? Well, moving I would basically say pulling into a test repository, right? So once I do a check-in, which is nothing but push into a GitHub, so what I can do is I can log into my test org. You're talking about test repository. Is this test repository of GitHub? Can you please confirm? Let me answer that on the chat window. If it is a test repository of GitHub, then we cannot move it. You'll have to basically untie this and then come back and then connect to your test repository to check in that particular asset. Matthew, regarding your question, we will have to check internally and then we'll have to revert back. We will reach out to you probably in some time, not today at least, but at least in a week's time. We'll have to check with our internal teams to see what's the minimum privilege allowed for GitHub. Okay, with regards to this, avoid moving or renaming source control assets that are used by other assets. When users move or rename a source control asset, references to the assets can break. Users cannot perform an undo or checkout on or an asset that has been removed, moved, or renamed. Okay, I think this is basically my best practices. Avoid moving or rename source control. Okay. Does this apply only to the assets that are already checked out? Okay, that's the question that you have. That's right. This applies to the assets that are checked out. How do we maintain versioning when we check in task flow which has multiple MCTs versus individual MCTs changing later? What should be the level of check-in MCT or task flow? How do we maintain versioning when we check in task flow which has multiple MCTs? We will get back to you on this, Raghavendra. We'll have to test this internally. How do we maintain versioning when we check in task flow which has multiple MCTs? Vrinda, I believe somebody has posted, Vijay has posted that they are not able to hear us. Are you able to hear me?
Could you please
Vrinda?
refresh your screen? I'm not sure why it's not working for Vijay. Are you able to hear us now? Yeah, he is able to hear us. Please continue.
Okay,
Bharat.
awesome. The next question is from Sujoy. Say we just deployed some artifacts from GitHub to production org. Can we do a deployment rollback or undo the pull action and restore the previous version of artifact in the production org? Yeah, that is doable. Okay, is there a forced undo checkout by another user in case someone? No, there is no forced checkout. Okay, so the next question is from Vanilla. What is the difference between checkout and pull? Okay, say for instance, if I go ahead and perform a check-in, that would not allow me to, or that would not allow any users to make any changes to the asset. Say for example, I do a check-in on a particular asset, that will become a read-only. So if I check out, then I can make the changes. Pull is something that whatever asset that is already checked into my GitHub, I'm pulling it to another org. Okay, if you use multiple GitHub, or I think that's been answered. Okay. Code migration can be automated using this. No, it cannot be automated as of now. The users have to go ahead and do a check-in of the assets and then pull the assets to a different org. There is one documentation I think we can share on the automatic deployment of the IICS. This is using the IICS asset management CLI and Jenkins pipelines. So we will share that link. You can refer that particular link. Okay. Another question from Venkata. EF MTT. If you have task flows which consists of mapping an MTT, how do we check in the assets object in GitHub? 1 second. Give me 1 minute. Checking on this, how do we check in the asset in GitHub? I think this is similar to the other question another user had posted. How do we maintain versioning when we check in multiple entities, which are individual entities in a task flow? We will get back to you on both of these questions. So I think there is one question from Raghavendra and then Venkata. So we will get back to you on that. So, Vrinda, I think there some of the questions that we have. I think we'll have to get back. The others, majority have been answered. So, if you can just send me the list of questions that needs to be answered, we'll take a look at it. For some questions, we'll have to reach out to our teams, the R&D teams, and then get some inputs from them, especially regarding the privileges and the task flows and the MTTs. Right? That is something that we'll have to check internally.
Sure. As soon as this presentation ends, the recording will be sent to you. You'll also find the recording in the Informatica Success portal and the YouTube channel as well. And if it looks like we have answered your questions. There is one question from Elias. Could you please answer that, Bharat?
Okay. Azure DevOps repository supported. Now, as we told, currently GitHub on cloud is supported. I think that's in the roadmap. However, we don't have any clear picture as to when we have this Azure DevOps supported. Currently, it's not supported, but definitely it's in the plans, but we don't have any ETA on that.
Yeah, thank you, Bharat. We have some more time to end this webinar. Please post your questions in the Q&A box. Yeah, there are 2 more questions, Bharat, please.
Okay.
One from Alexander.
Okay, is application integration supported? I think for now we only support cloud data integration. Cloud application integration is not supported. For the Azure DevOps, just a quick confirmation on that. So we do have a feature request open on that for the Azure DevOps. I can share the feature request number. If you want to make a note, it's IF-29362. I repeat, IF-29362.
And one more question from Matthew.
Yeah. Okay. Can you explain what master branch support is? I think by default, all the assets just go to the master branch, the URL where you have used it in the GitHub, right? So whatever the explore or the folder. So if you saw in my GitHub demo, I have created a URL with B Krishna. So all the assets are by default moved to that particular location. There is currently we don't support branches, so by default everything goes to whatever the branch that we have created on, and then provide it in the URL.
Okay, thank you, Bharat. Looks like we have answered most of the questions. If we have missed out on any, we'll get back to you after the presentation. Thank you for joining this webinar. Hope everyone is well and safe at this time. We'll see you for the next Tech Tuesdays webinar. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for joining.